The fate of humanity rested on Lieutenant Commander Adrian Cross's shoulders as the vast armada of arrogant Xanar warships surrounded his desperate and outmatched fleet. On the bridge of the UEN Retribution, Cross stared with steely focus, knowing that the cunning strategy he devised could mean triumph or total annihilation. Despite being outnumbered 10-1, Cross had a plan, an intricate trap that would demonstrate to the galaxy that humans should never, ever be underestimated. Victory now depended on Cross executing his ingenious strategy flawlessly, for one wrong move would spell disaster for humankind. The crew clapped as Adrian walked through the ship. His stomach turned. He saw the enemy ship nearing Mars on the screen. "We're supposed to return to base," his second-in-command Elena reminded him. They entered the strategy room. "Those are the orders." "No time for that," Adrian said, watching the enemy fire on Mars. "We make our stand here, or we lose everything." Elena frowned. "That defies orders. We could die." "I know," Adrian said firmly. "Get the fleet ready. We leave for Mars now." As they flew to Mars, Adrian saw the smoke rising from the ravaged outposts. The enemy ship loomed over the red planet like a predator over prey. "Full attack," Adrian ordered clearly on the bridge. His ships scattered in all directions, engines flaring in the dark space. The enemy fired back, tracing bright lines of destruction following Adrian's movements. "We breach on my signal," Adrian told his armed team in the airlock. They gripped their weapons with determination. Their pod hit the enemy hull with force. They blew open the airlock. Fire lit the corridor as they charged in. Boots rang out, men shouting as they advanced. "Move!" Adrian shouted, ducking wild shots that scorched the walls. They pushed the enemy back toward the bridge. "Squad Bravo, clear left," he said, pressing the attack. His team knew the mission: disable the ship or die trying. Elena radioed, "We've got your back, Adrian. Hit them hard." "We will," he confirmed. He glanced back before kicking down the bridge door. The bridge was chaos. Officers scrambled as the team burst in. Adrian fired, dropping them one by one. His team spread out, covering each other with precision. Adrian reached the captain's console, manually overriding the controls. The ship lurched and died under his command. Outside, Mars hovered in space, saved by human defiance. The metal door slid open with a hiss. The control room inside brimmed with alien tech. Damaged panels threw sparks into the shadows as Cross and his team stomped in. Vorks, the hulking Xanar commander, roared. His elite guards charged forward. The air erupted with gunfire and clanging metal as human and alien clashed. Cross weaved through the energy blasts with practiced ease. His training had prepared him for this moment. A Xanar warrior lunged. Cross sidestepped, twisting its arm and slamming it to the floor. He pushed on toward Vorks, blades ready. Vorks's eyes narrowed, locking onto Cross. "You've studied us," Vorks hissed as he slashed his blades. Cross countered each strike, moving fluidly in the dance of combat. He feinted left, then twisted right, stripping Vorks's weapon away with a swift blow. Outside, the battle intensified. The Retribution's crew seized the moment, silencing the Dominator's cannons. Alarms blared, a crippling strike against the alien ship. With Vorks disarmed, Cross bellowed, "Surrender or die!" Vorks sneered and tapped the console, initiating the self-destruct sequence. The room erupted into chaos. Red lights flashed as the countdown began, promising doom. Cross's team scrambled at the controls, struggling to decode the alien symbols. Time was their enemy now. "Sanchez, stop it," Cross barked. Sanchez's fingers flew over the console, humanity's last hope. Her brilliance was their only chance. "Almost," Sanchez muttered. Seconds ticked away. Then, with a merciful beep, the countdown halted at Air 023. "Got it!" Sanchez gasped in relief. The immediate threat was gone, but they had to hurry. Vorks snarled as they bound him and hauled him away. Backup detonation had begun. "We're leaving now!" Cross yelled. They raced through shaking, groaning corridors as panels burst in showers of sparks. The ship shuddered with deep booms. Adrian's heart pounded as they reached the pod. The hatch sealed with a thud, thrusters ignited, and they watched the crippled Dominator erupt in explosions, a grim reminder of the Xanar threat. But today, humanity was united and undeterred. Cross stood still in the bright white tribunal room. 4 officers sat facing him, their faces serious and eyes fixed on Cross. Cross's uniform was perfect, but everyone knew he disobeyed orders. The quiet hung heavy, broken only by low voices. "You ignored orders, Lieutenant Commander," the head officer said in a steady, controlled voice. "You risked the whole fleet, even though you won." Cross looked right at him. "Sir, I did it to protect Mars and Earth. Respectfully, I stand by what I did." The tribunal whispered to each other, a hushed buzz compared to the battle's chaos before. They turned back to Cross. "What you did was reckless, but you saved lives on Mars," the head officer admitted. "You keep the retribution. Consider this your last warning, Cross." Relief swept through the room. Cross stood taller and just nodded firmly. Back on the retribution, Cross left the bright tribunal for the familiar ship sounds. The crew looked at Cross with respect and anticipation. They knew their commander faced the Xanar and his own leaders, and won. An officer hurried over, datapad in hand. "Sir, intelligence on a Xanar superweapon, codename Obliterator. It can wipe out whole planets." Cross took in the news as his mind raced with plans already. "Where is it?" "Intel suggests a distant nebula. We're short on time. The fleet's regrouping." Cross knew what must be done. "Get a team. We go dark." In the strategy room, Cross contacted spies on screens barely lit. Each had a piece of where the Obliterator hid. Cross listened, took notes, and slowly the pieces formed a bad picture. "We'll find it," Cross told his officers, conviction in his voice. "We'll destroy it." Meanwhile, the deep Xanar voices blared propaganda across the stars. Vaux's prisoner rallied cries for revenge. Cross watched, the Xanar vengeance stoking a fire in him. He turned to his grim, fist-clenched crew watching the broadcasts. "The Xanar think they'll break us, scare us into submitting." Cross spoke clearly. "They're wrong. We're not just defending humanity. We're defining it." The crew stood silently, then one by one, salutes rose with faces set firm. "We'll do whatever it takes, sir," Elena echoed them all. Cross nodded curtly. "Prep the ship. We leave for the nebula at 0400. As the crew left, Cross stayed by the command console, the silent stars outside hiding dangers. The nebula was out there, and the key to ending this threat once and for all. The coming battle was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Adrian Cross and the human spirit would never be underestimated. The retribution moved silently through the nebula. Thick clouds of colorful gas surrounded the ship. Adrian steered softly to avoid Xanar patrols detecting them. The crew was quiet, knowing discovery meant death. "Steady," Adrian whispered. His eyes watched the sensors. Elena nodded, ready to dive into the clouds if he ordered. On the display, the patrol ships skirted the clouds where the retribution hid. Adrian felt the tension on the bridge. For days, they drifted in silence, waiting. The crew grew tired, reacting to any alarm. On the fourth day, the sensors found what they needed, the weapon construction site. "We've got it," Elena said with relief. They watched the hive of activity around the Obliterator. Ships swarmed the massive weapon as it took shape. Adrian studied the feeds, planning their attack. "We go in as them," he said, pulling up stolen codes. The crew looked uneasy. It was bold and dangerous. Elena entered the codes. The retribution disguised itself. They received clearance to approach the site. Holding their breath, they flew closer, posing as a supply ship. The tense moments passed without discovery. In orbit, the retribution attacked in a barrage. Adrian stood firm amid the erupting chaos outside. "Now!" he ordered. His team followed him into battle. They stormed through metallic halls, shooting guards in shock at the bold attack. Their boots pounded toward the weapon core, alive with lethal energy. A Xanar scientist raised his hands in surrender. "I'll help you. I can't let you erase worlds," he said defiantly. He showed them the core's weakness, a pulsing conduit. "Trigger this to destroy it all, but flee quickly or perish with it." Adrian looked at his resolute team. This was their chance to save or doom everything. "Sanchez, work with him," Adrian said urgently. "Prepare to evacuate fast." They followed the scientist's moves. The core glowed brighter, ready to detonate. "Time to go," Adrian yelled. They raced back through panicking Xanar. The retribution awaited, ready to sprint for safety. In the hold, Adrian watched the nebula recede as they fled, the massive detonation consuming it all. The shockwave chased them, but humanity would not be underestimated. As the nebula burned, it shone with their resolve. They had outwitted and emerged not just alive but as beacons of hope. Cross checked his watch. Less than 60 seconds to go. He barked at Corporal Reese. "Plant those charges!" The team moved through the huge room. They placed explosives at weak spots. Each member knew the stakes. They moved fast but precise. Sanchez watched the countdown. Her breathing was shallow. 30 seconds, she called out. The red numbers reflected in her eyes. Each person nodded, focused as they set the detonators. The ship hull groaned. Xanar ships hit the shields with volleys. The bridge crew worked hard. Sparks flew as they turned the ship to escape. "Explosives are set," Cross said into the comm. "Let's move out." Their boots clattered in the corridors. The enemy blasts shook the ship's soul. No mistakes allowed. Elena steered the ship expertly despite the bombardment. The engines screamed, but she held course. "Brace yourselves," she warned them. Cross led them running into the hangar and their shuttle. "Get on board," he shouted over the incoming fire's whistle. Their armor clanked on the metal deck as they piled in. The shuttle door thudded shut, and the thrusters fired hard. Through the window, they watched the Retribution's engines flare. The wounded ship clawed its way out of the nebula's grip. The universe flared white as the explosives did their deadly work. The shockwave expanded and consumed the obliterator and all around it. On the shuttle, Cross gripped his seat as they were rocked by the aftermath. Only the hum of the ship and their heavy breathing filled the silence. "We're clear," Cross finally said, relief and fatigue in his voice. Silent nods passed among the crew. Alive, weapon destroyed, mission done. Then a distress beep shattered their moment of peace. Sanchez checked the console, eyes wide. "The Xanar scientist, he's still out there." Disbelief in her voice. Resolve hardened Cross's eyes. "We're going back. No one gets left behind." The Retribution had beaten the Xanar and their superweapon. Now humanity proved what it stood for. They turned around, heading into the transformed nebula's heart. The rescue was their next battle, and in the silence of space, their course was set. The nebula swirled outside the Retribution, raw power with crackling energy and flying debris through the void. Cross stood on the bridge, eyes on the escape pod beacon flickering weak in the chaos. "He's alive," Sanchez said, awed but worried. The crew looked at each other, wondering if one life was worth the risk. Cross turned to his advisors in the dim light. "We get him back. No debate." His voice left no room to argue. "They could see this as an act of war," an advisor said, hands flat on the cold table. "Leaving him to die when we can save him could start peace," Cross said back. "Get ready to rescue him." The bridge moved fast but controlled. They set course, calculated moves. The engines rumbled soft but determined as the ship turned back into the nebula. Debris hammered the hull loud as hail on a tin roof. Bursts of energy from the core lit up the screen, blinding white. Elena piloted precisely, dipping, spinning, threading the needle. They found the pod, a speck against the fury, its beacon blinking on sensors. Cross narrowed his eyes. "Match course. Get close." The team stood heavy in combat gear by the airlock. Doors opened. The pod was meters away. The Xanar visible through the window, hands on the glass, breathing fast and shallow. The team jumped into the vacuum, boots anchoring them to the hull as they reached out, grabbing the pod. They clanked metal, pulling it in. The hatch opened. The Xanar collapsed into their arms, gasping raggedly. Inside, medics swarmed him, pumping air into his lungs. "He's stable," one said, easing the room's tension. On the bridge, Cross watched the nebula disappear, a raging storm behind. The Xanar, now in a jumpsuit, came up to him solemnly grateful. "You saved me," he said, accent thick but sincere. Cross nodded, acknowledging the moment's weight. "You have information?" "Yes, war plans, plans to end this," the Xanar replied, holding out data chips. Cross took the chips, slotting them in. Plans appeared. Strategies, contingencies, Xanar thoughts bare. More than intel, understanding. Sanchez read the projections, the troop movements. "This could change the war," she said softly. "It might," Cross replied. He looked around at his determined crew, their resilience echoing back. The Retribution sailed from the burning nebula, purpose in its trail. Cross knew the next steps were critical, peace or war on the brink. But with this alliance, they would move ahead, eyes open. The crew returned to stations, minds ready for what was coming. Cross stood firm, the silent stars bearing witness. The nebula shrank away, space stretching ahead. Their course set, resolve unbroken. The game of war continued, and humanity played to win. Keslin hunched over the flickering hologram, the shifting light casting shadows on his face. The room hummed with computers and murmured voices. Cross stood behind, watching the alien script flow across the screen. Keslin's fingers flew over the controls. The encrypted language took shape. He looked at Cross. "They're coming," he said urgently. "Full force, headed for Farpoint." Cross relayed the news to command. Within an hour, the order to fortify Farpoint spread. Shovels dug trenches along the perimeter. Steel bunkers rose, housing cannons. The outpost grew fangs. Soldiers hauled ammo, stocked shelters, calibrated weapons. Farpoint shifted from research to fortress. Adrian passed before the troops in battle gear, focused and steady. "This ground is ours," he stated firmly. "We will not surrender it cheaply." Nods answered his call, faces hardened with purpose. The sky darkened as the armada dropped from warp, blotting stars. Cross stood atop the bunker, watching the cruisers take position. Artillery screamed across space, flashed against shields. The ground shook. Rifles cracked over comms. Drones peppered the sky with return fire. Boarding ships slammed the hull, clangs signaling hand-to-hand combat. Cross jumped into the trenches, drawing his sidearm. He shouted, joining the front line as soldiers repelled the first wave. Human faces showed defiance, rifles declaring humanity's resilience and fury. The static blasted through the comm, each burst louder and sharper. Adrian Cross stood in the bunker, hands behind his back. Sweat mixed with dirt on his face. The voice coming through the comm was desperate, barely a whisper, but it shook with fear. "They're here, Xana, all over, we can't stop them." It pleaded for help, then faded out. The room went silent. Soldiers froze and glanced at their commander. Dirt and blood streaked their exhausted faces. Ammo boxes lay open, most empty, scattered around. Energy weapons leaned on the sandbags at the entrance. Distant blasts echoed outside. Cross turned to his staff. Their eyes begged for leadership. "Options," he barked, his voice piercing the quiet. Lee stepped up. Tactical operations. "Split forces, evac team to the settlers, but it thins our line here." Elena Sanchez met Cross's eyes. She knew the weight of their choice. She saw Cross nod. They trusted each other in battle. "Do it," Cross ordered. "Sanchez, take Gamma Team, get those settlers out." The choice was fast, ripping off a bandage, dangerous but necessary to survive. Cross turned back to the console, the blinking map showing the Xanar forces getting closer. Sanchez's team suited up as their boots pounded the metal floor. They moved fast but steady, heading to the hangar and their waiting shuttle, its engines warming to launch. Cross turned his focus back to the outpost. He grabbed his rifle and dropped into the trenches. The stink of charged air stuck thick from all the shots. Soldiers shouted locations, their voices raspy. Cross stepped beside a young private, the kid's helmet marked by a scorch. "Steady," Cross said, gripping the soldier's shoulder. The private nodded, holding his gun tighter. Xanar ghosted through the haze, armor glinting in the madness. Cross took aim, his shots joining the roar. Explosions shook the ground under their feet. The outer defense cracked as a section crumbled. Xanar flooded the gap. Cross dove in without hesitation. He knocked a plasma blade away with his rifle, slamming the butt into the enemy's visor. His soldiers rallied, firing into the breach. As they fought, engines rumbled far off. In Cross's mind, hope flickered. The evac ship racing to safety. They had to make it. Then came the yell, "Evac successful, settlers safe." Those words ignited the soldiers. They dug deeper, their shots fueled by new purpose. They held the line, not just for ground, but for the lives now safe. The base shuddered under the blows, but the defenders' wills burned bright. Cross pushed forward with his troops, moving with conviction. They fought not to conquer, but to protect. Every fallen invader proved their resolve. Dust clouds billowed as the shells hit. The human station shook. Soldiers bumped shoulders, moving, firing, reloading. They knew every second mattered. Xanar ships swarmed overhead, shadows on the battered ground. Cross gripped the controls, face lit by blinking lights. His squad flew tight formation. He checked the screen. Enemy ships loomed large. "Stay sharp," he said evenly. But his gut twisted. They charged the Xanar fleet, blasters humming. The enemy didn't expect a frontal attack. Their ships flew loose. Cross's fighters cut through, blasters firing bright lines. 2 Xanar ships flickered, shields failed. Cross pulled up hard, his squad followed. "Nice shooting," said Elena over the comm. She sounded focused but strained. "Now let's give them hell." The station seized the chance. Troops rushed out, rifles cracked, cannons boomed. Orders rang out, punching the attack. Xanar ships buckled under fire, trailing smoke and flame. Thuds shuddered the ground as they crashed. Cross watched from above, his heart pounded with the blasts. Below, soldiers surged forward, shouting. They moved swiftly with purpose. He'd opened the door. Now they would kick it in. "Push, push, push," Lee yelled over comms, always calm. "They're falling back." His squad regrouped, engines roared. They dove back into the fray. Cross targeted a cruiser, squeezed the trigger. Another Xanar ship lost its fight with gravity. Cheers broke out on comms. Morale rose with each falling ship. Cross allowed himself one breath. Hope sharpened the ozone scent of blaster fire. "We've got them running," Cross said, surprised at his own voice. It was true. The Xanar reeled. Below, soldiers cheered, watching enemy ships kiss dirt. Dust and fire remained where threat once loomed. The station, now fortress, held its ground. Cross swung around for another pass, squadron behind. His display blinked targets. The ground assault pressed on. Human will met Xanar force. They clashed, defenders clawing back each inch. This was humanity's stand, not just for survival but defiance. The Xanar expected surrender. Instead, they got human fire, led by Cross, unwavering, shifting the war. The fighters reformed. Below, the station held. Above, the Xanar faltered. A fight for the future, humanity stood firm. Adrian Cross stared at the outpost. Men hammered metal plates into the barriers. The thudding of construction echoed all around. Soldiers sweated but kept working. Dr. Keslin walked up with a data pad. His face looked set with purpose. "I've got an idea to hit them," Keslin said evenly. He tapped the pad to show a Xanar ship blueprint. Cross scanned the plans and nodded. A direct attack on their command center could cripple them. "We infiltrate using their own ship," Keslin said. "Sabotage from within." The noise faded as Cross thought hard. Dangerous, yes, but it could end this war. "Massive risk," Cross said. "If they catch us—" "It's our best shot at victory," Keslin pressed. Cross surveyed his crew. Their faces said it all. "We do it," Cross confirmed. Hours later, the Xanar ship rumbled to life, its signals masked for deception. The skilled team filed aboard on a grave mission. Cross eyed them with pride. Volunteers stepping into the fire willingly. The dark ship slid from the outpost shadows. Cross gripped the controls. Foreign screens blinked around the bridge. The team prepped weapons and tools silently. "Quietly now, and this might just work," Cross whispered. They flew deeper toward the massive Xanar base. Ships buzzed about like insects. Cross's heart hammered. The tension thickened. He keyed the comm. "Breach on my mark." They approached the huge hull in eerie silence. Cross's finger hovered over the controls. "Now," he said. The team stormed forward as the airlock clamped tight. Doors exploded inward. They charged out, armed and ready. No alarms yet. They crept through empty halls. Keslin led them to the nerve center door. Cross signaled. The door hissed open. They swarmed the command room in a whirlwind, surprising the operators. Cross scanned for targets. A Xanar noticed them and grabbed for the alarm. Cross shot it dead center. It slumped over. Keslin rapidly worked the main console, severing connections. "Minutes left," he warned tersely. "We've overstayed already," Cross replied. With a last tap, Keslin finished his sabotage. "Done," he said. Like ghosts, they withdrew from the crippled base. The headless Xanar fleet would collapse now. Back aboard the enemy ship, the weight of their mission hung thick, but hope now glimmered. They had bought more than time. They had bought possibility. The outpost welcomed them home eagerly. Humanity had landed a crushing blow this day. Once more, they proved not to be underestimated. The ship, wrapped in stolen camouflage, slid through space. Cross watched the screens. Signs of patrol craft blinked. The crew was silent. Keslin hunched over console inputting codes. Patrols waved them on. Faces tightened. The crew knew ahead lay the real test. "We're near," Keslin whispered, strained but focused. Cross eyed the sky. Huge command center loomed, turrets turning slow. Scans passed them by so far. Tension gripped the crew, waiting for trouble. A sudden call. "They want aboard," reported the tense officer. Keslin just nodded, calm under pressure. "Expected, I'm ready." The big Xana inspector stepped through the airlock, eyes narrowed and scanning. His hand hovered over his gun. The crew stood rigid. Only hum of engines and footsteps filled the silent ship. Keslin met him, gesturing to the data pad. "Apologies, navigation problems. Been rerouting power." Smooth words, but urgent. The inspector grunted, glancing between Keslin and pad, stepped closer, dominating the space, barked harsh alien words, demanding answers. Keslin responded fluently, showed fake logs and charts, detailed lies. Suspicion lingered in the Xanar's posture. Stood like a statue of authority. Long minutes as the Xanar checked papers, screens. Cross touched his hidden gun, ready if needed. The inspector just nodded, curt and sharp. "Proceed," he grunted and turned to leave. Keslin slowly exhaled as door closed on the Xanar. Cross relaxed his hand away from the gun. The ship moved on through space, the command center ahead unaware. Slid into bay amongst true Xanar ships. "It's time," Cross commanded. The team rose up, gathered weapons, tools, gear, checked each other, eyes locked in silent promise. "Quiet and quick, no mistakes," Cross ordered. Nods of agreement followed, motions tight and precise. They left the ship through empty bay full of alien tech and humming engines. Boots made no sound crossing the metal floor. Shadows only cover under bright lights overhead. At main door, Cross paused, listening. No alarm, no running feet, all clear. They slipped inside the beast's belly, down corridors that led to the heart of Xanar power. Door to command center just ahead. Obstacle and opportunity. Door slid open at Keslin's touch, revealing nerve center of Xanar control. Operators staffed stations, unaware of danger now among them. Cross raised his weapon, fanned out on well-rehearsed dance made real at last. An operator turned, eyes wide with alarm. Hand reached for emergency call. Cross's shot dropped him cleanly. Keslin flew to the controls, fingers in flurry. Connections cut, systems crashing blind. The mind of Xanar fleet going dark. "Minutes at most," Keslin called over his shoulder. "Let's move," Cross answered. Turned and left the way they came, shadows stretching down lit hall. The waking command center stirred too late behind them. Xanar would now know fear as fleets fumbled headless. They reached the ship, bay still quiet, no alarms yet sounding, slipped aboard, door sealing out danger. Cross sat at the controls, screens flashing alien warnings, met each set face, grim but victorious. "We've bought time, we've bought hope," he said. Ship pulled away clean from confusion left in their wake. Fallen Xanar command center faded behind them, fortress now weakened. Humanity, underestimated, had proven might once more with their strike deep into the enemy heart. Keslin led, eyes on the blinking pad. Cross watched his back, gripping his rifle tight. They moved through the sterile hallways, boots muffled on the metal floor. The command center door hissed open. The forest of consoles blinked, manned by figures in sleek armor. The team spread out, fast and precise. Keslin's hands flew over a console. Cross scanned faces for threats. An operator glanced up, eyes narrowed. Alarm shot through Cross. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared, lights flashed red. Soldiers swarmed in, rifles raised. Cross's team reacted, swift and brutal. Shots cracked out. Cross fired controlled bursts, bullets finding marks. Keslin shouted over the noise, "False orders sent!" His fingers tapped commands. Ships outside veered, lights blinking wild. No reinforcements came. They pressed on, using the chaos. Bombs armed, timers ticking. They retreated, boots pounding as explosions erupted behind. They didn't look back. The ship neared. Cross's chest heaved as they sealed the airlock. Keslin slumped against the wall, panting. "That'll shake them." They exchanged looks, acknowledging the day's work. Station crippled, fleet in disarray, a critical blow dealt. Cross sank into the pilot's seat, engines thrummed alive, screens lit with the chaos they'd unleashed. It was done. They had sown confusion, now to watch the Empire grapple with it. "Home," Cross said. The word carried their survival's weight. They settled in as stars stretched before them. They had won, victory bought in blood and cunning. The Xanar wouldn't underestimate humans again. The engines of the Retribution hummed as the ship cut through space back to human territory. Cross stood on the bridge, staring at the screen. He watched dots representing Xanar ships scattering in every direction. His crew worked around him, focused on their tasks. The Xanar fleet moved chaotically, like a snake without a head striking wildly. "Commander, fleet report," said the comms officer. She looked up from her station, exhausted but excited. "We're pushing them back. It's working." On the screen, human ships darted about, attacking fleeing Xanar vessels. Flashes of light marked collisions between energy beams and shields. The dance of destruction was led by humanity. "Keep me updated on every move, comms," Cross ordered. He walked over to Lee, his tactical advisor, staring at data streams. Lee's fingers flew across the interface, pulling reports and redirecting forces with quick taps. Cross folded his arms, scanning the flickering projections. "Keep pressure on their flanks. Don't let them regroup or rest." "Yes, Commander," Lee responded, focused. The crew matched his level of commitment, ready for the long battle ahead. Word spread of human victories. Another Xanar cruiser down, another base retaken. But Cross's face remained hard as cheers sounded around him. Rumors carried his name, hailed as the architect of the uprising, but his eyes held no celebration, only the chessboard of war laid out before him. The silence of space outside was a backdrop for the sounds of the fight. Cannon thunder, marching soldiers on distant moons, the pulse of pursuing engines. Humanity refused to go quietly. A priority message cut through. "Commander Cross, priority transmission from Earth Command." Cross approached the console and nodded. General Williams' voice echoed across the silent bridge. "You've turned the tide, but stay sharp. Intelligence says the Xanar are fragmenting, fighting over power." Cross's gravelly reply affirmed he would stay vigilant against their unpredictability. He turned to his crew, faces looking to him for direction. "We've dealt a blow, but this beast isn't dead. Stay focused. I want eyes on every sector. Any Xanar movements reported." Days turned to weeks of vigilance. Cross barely left the bridge, catching moments of restless sleep in his chair, always ready. The fractured Xanar fleet struck like shards of broken glass, chaotic and unpredictable. Cross summoned Dr. Keslin, former Xanar now advising human tactics. Keslin's face was grave as they examined the data. "A new Xanar leader will rise, Commander. When they do, the fleet will rally behind them." Cross leaned over the table, jaw set. "We'll use this time to prepare. I want to know their hierarchy, every potential new leader. We'll be ready." Keslin nodded, eyes weighed by divided loyalty. "I'll help however I can." The war continued, battles won, ground lost and retaken. At the center stood Cross, architect of humanity's comeback, eyes on the horizon, resolve unbroken. Cross stood in the ship command center. His shoulders stiffened as he waited for word from potential allies. Dr. Keslin worked the controls. His fingers moved fast to connect them. "We've got the Varn on," Keslin said. The Varn's face on the screen looked tired and old, but his eyes burned with hope. "We're with you, Commander," he told Cross. One by one, Cross reached out to species under Xanar rule. He chose each word with care to join them together, to make them want to fight. The main hall filled with many beings. Cross walked among them in his plain uniform. He watched everything closely. Humans trained with feathered and scaled soldiers. The air rang with the sounds of metal and blasters. Keslin hurried to link humans and aliens. Everyone worked hard to prepare. Cross stopped by a room where human and alien officers leaned over a map. They talked soft about battle plans. When night came, Cross stood before the ragtag troops. Keslin spoke his words aloud. "We've all bled under the Xanars," Cross said steady. "Now we heal and fight together. We're one alliance with one goal: freedom." The crowd rumbled together in agreement. Here names didn't matter, only the cause. The station blazed with light as they readied for war. The halls teemed with activity. In the mess hall, soldiers of all kinds shared food. Each meal showed their diversity. Cross ended his day gazing at the stars. He knew this calm before the storm wouldn't last. But for now, they were ready to stand strong against the coming chaos. The warships hung in space, a mosaic of metal. Cruisers alongside fighters, avian ships with the fleet. Together they sliced through the black. Their target loomed ahead, the Raxus system, gripped by the Xanar. Adrian Cross stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the enemy swarm circling the planets. This battle would be no easy fight. "Attack pattern Delta," Cross ordered, voice steady. The ships broke formation, humans taking point. Xanar fighters cut through the ranks, guns flashing. Each enemy blast scored a scar of loss, tallied in silence. Cross watched a frigate rupture and die, claimed by the Void. More lives gone, but the fleet pushed on. Death was the cost of this war. Beside Cross, Lee moved her fingers fast over the controls, coordinating shots. "We broke their lines. Sector 7 is ours." Cross nodded, lips tight in victory. "Push forward. No one fights alone." On screen, a Tuolan ship rammed a Xanar destroyer, both lost in sacrifice. The fleet surged through the opening, resolve rising like a tide. Planets hung in the balance, on the knife edge of freedom or despair. As Xanar holds crumbled, cheers flooded the comms. Cross just watched, silent. Planet by planet, the chains broke. People ran from shattered bunkers, their voices joining the chorus of freedom. They enlisted to fight, swelling the ranks. After, the air hummed with victory and those now gone. Cross surveyed the damage, the cost carved into his mind. "We sent a message," Cross told his crew, voice raw with determination. "Our strength is unity, our weapon, diversity. We stand together, we do not cower." The news spread through the galaxy, passed voice to voice. Oppressed systems rose up, emboldened by the show of might. Adrift amid the wreckage, the Retribution heard the message clear: "Underestimate humanity at the cost of your worlds." Zorvex took command with a snarl. The harsh glow of battle screens lit the shadowed Xanar War Council hall. "We end this now," he growled. His voice cut the air sharply. The commanders beside him stiffened with fear and respect. Screens flashed images of human planets under attack again. Xanar cruisers blasted the ground, buildings crumbled under the relentless blows. People scrambled and fled or fought back with what little they had. The Xanar retaliation was swift and calculated. They systematically reclaimed what was lost. The news reached Cross on the Retribution's bridge. Console hums backdropped reports of worlds taken, defenses breached, coalition forces retreating. The crew moved urgently, but their eyes held concern. Cross took in the data, jaw tight, hands clenched. In the cramped meeting room, Cross laid out plans across the glowing table. Blueprints and flight paths hovered in the air. His officers leaned in, tracing lines on the star map projection. "There," Cross pointed at the throbbing red system. "That's the heart. We take that. We take the war." Beside him, Lee narrowed her eyes. "The defenses," she started, but Cross cut her off. "We know, but it's the way," he replied. The heavy silence that followed showed what was at stake. Preparations blurred in activity. Cross walked the hangar where sleek fighters lined up. Crews checked every weapon and thruster. He stopped at one, firmly placing his hand on the cold hull, feeling the potential within. Back on the Retribution, Cross gathered his command team. The faces around him looked resolute, aware of the enormity ahead. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Cross said steadily, "but we have something they don't." He glanced around. "We fight for each other, for what we believe. That makes us stronger." The assault began in a burst of thrusters as the coalition fleet darted towards the heavily guarded system, breaking the dark silence of space. Enemy stations spotted them, signaling urgently to coordinate response. But the momentum was with Cross. Ships wove through the barrage of welcoming fire. Brief, bright explosions flared shields. Cross, strapped into the command seat, eyes on the view screen, directed the assault in terse commands. "Focus fire there," he ordered, pointing at a weak spot in the enemy's armor. On the main screen, the target system loomed, a network of satellites and gun platforms orbiting a stoic planet. Every Xanar gun, missile and soldier ready to defend it. As the furious battle raged, Cross's resolve held firm. Damage reports and chatter filled the bridge, but he remained the calm eye of the storm. Losses mounted on both sides, but Cross pushed forward, each order precise, calculating to keep the enemy unbalanced. The fighting intensified as they reached the core. Cross stood resolute, anticipating the enemy's moves with flawless execution from his honed crew. A deadly dance. The outcome was unclear, ships and lives spent like currency. But as the dust settled, one thing was evident: Cross and humanity would not submit. The Admiral's fight for unity ignited hearts. Whatever end awaited, it would not be surrender. Cross stared at star charts and notes spread across screens. Harsh light carved shadows on his face. He traced paths on the glowing map, marking plans. The control room buzzed. Command weighed on him, ate his sleep. He shoved away from the table, rubbed his eyes, stepped between crews murmuring updates. "Alliance leaders on secure channel," a crew member said. Cross snapped alert, straightened, went to the private room. Coalition leaders appeared. Each looked burdened. The Skrill leader's feathers ruffled, beak clicking fast. "We must strike fast. Use momentum." Granite-skinned Rulth rumbled, "Defenses need strength. Rush to battle, invite slaughter." Cross listened, nodded at each view. "You both have merit. We hit surgical and build defense." He locked eyes with them. "We blend tactics." Debate stretched on. Cross wove their plans into one. Last screen went dark. Urgent message blinked. "Incoming intel, spies." Cross read. Felt dread's icy grip. The savage Xanar admiral rallied the fleet and forged a second planet killer. Cross turned to the bridge. Consoles beeped and clattered, fading backdrop. "Time's not ours," he said. His voice cut through rhythm. Crew hands flew, data streamed. Mechanics clanked, engines pushed for early leave. "Expedite supply runs, full strength in one cycle," Cross ordered. He stepped into the massive hangar. The ship loomed. Fragile hope. In strategy room, projections floated. Sanchez pointed. "Defenses tightest here." Confidence and urgency in her voice. "We faint there," Cross decided. "Main force hits less guarded flank, our entry point." Officers straightened. Silent resolve charged the air. They left to turn plans into actions. Cross watched the starscape beyond the shield. Time slipped away. Each moment a chance for Xanar to finish their planet killer. No room for doubt or fear. Jaw set, he returned to the bridge. Past soldiers, human and alien, brief nods and salutes. Preparations rumbled, underscored the stakes. A second superweapon meant no retreat or surrender. Cross stood before the star map. Enemy blips and codes replaced allies. His hands steady, voice firm as he deployed units, delivered orders. They would strike together, many as one, against underestimating foe, and they would do so before stars were silenced by Xanar hands. The ships spread out, shooting the false targets. Cross watched from the bridge, seeing the enemy take the bait. "Go to Phase 2, he ordered Sanchez. She nodded sharply and spoke into her comm. The small strike ships moved silently behind the asteroids. The rocks tumbled through space, colliding and throwing bursts of light. The asteroids hid the ships from the enemy's sensors. Hours passed in silence, only the occasional beep breaking the tension on the bridge. Cross watched the screen as the retribution weaved between the asteroids. Each small movement brought them closer to the enemy's heart. "Clear the field," said the navigator. Her hands moved fast, plotting their exit. The retribution burst from the asteroids. The enemy's defenses stretched before them. Before they could react, the coalition ships unleashed a storm of lasers. "Ground teams, go!" Cross barked into the comm. Pods launched from the fleet toward the planet. Cross left the bridge and went to the planet with his team. Their boots hit the ground with thuds as they breached the defenses. Blaster fire lit up the dark as soldiers fought. They cleared each room, getting closer to the core. Screams and orders echoed, but Cross only saw the objective. The core door loomed, sealed tight. Cross signaled the demo team, who cut through it with torches before blasting it open. Inside, alien tech blinked and glowed. Wires fed into the heart. A countdown ticked down to activation. Cross scanned for the controls, pressing the symbols that appeared. Keslin's face came on screen, guiding Cross through disarming it just in time. The core went dark and silent. They had stopped the threat. Cross and his team went back outside into the raging battle. On the Retribution, Sanchez saw their strength surge as the weapon shut down. Its silhouette stood dark against the planet it had threatened. The Retribution pulled away, the battle won. Cross looked back at the lifeless weapon. They had sent a message: underestimate humanity at your own peril. The doors smashed open under the attack. Laser fire filled the room as Cross ran in with his troops. The Zanar loyalists boiled with rage as they defended the weapon's core. Cross ducked behind consoles, blasting away. Gunshots echoed as they marched on. He looked around. Soldiers of all kinds fired back in rhythm. "Secure the core," Cross yelled. His engineers rushed the alien tech, hands racing, countering Zanar controls. Sweat dripped as they scrambled. Cross looked up at the screens. Ships writhed in flame, metal broke apart. The cost climbed higher. An engineer nodded. Cross grabbed the comms. "Overload it! We end this now!" The engineer hesitated just a moment. Then his fingers danced over the controls. "Escape pods, double time," Cross ordered. "Go, go, go!" They ran through mazes of halls. Explosions rumbled behind. They dodged last-ditch Zanar troops. Boots echoed over blaring alarms. The pods gaped open. His team dove in one by one. Cross saw faces that might not make it. He shoved the last soldier in, ignoring the lump in his throat. Cross climbed into the final pod and slammed it shut. His palm hit the eject button as the superweapon shook. The pod shot away in silence but for their breathing. Through the window, white light consumed the superweapon, expanding and contracting like a final word. It was done. The weapon destroyed. They had won this battle. But Cross felt the weight of the cost. Debris thumped. They would honor the lost. For now, shared silence held their hard-earned victory. This moment would echo across space. But the war wasn't over. From inside the escape pod, Cross stared out at the space around the exploding superweapon. It boiled with chaotic light, but no sound reached him. All he heard were the loud bangs of debris hitting the hull and his crew breathing hard. He watched shockwaves spread from the blast. They reached out and hit the Zanar ships too slow to turn away. The ships scattered into space, engines flaring in panic. Allied ships swarmed the confused Zanar, firing their weapons. Cross felt each shot pulse through the pod floor. Now was their chance to turn this from a costly victory into a strategic gain. When an ally's tractor beam caught them, the pod shuddered and its lights blinked from the strain. Cross braced against the wall as they reeled his pod in. The second the hatch opened, he stepped onto the rescue ship. Grease-smeared and tear-streaked faces met his gaze and nodded. They understood the unspoken loss in his eyes. Sanchez appeared on screen, her face tired but resilient. She tersely detailed the Retribution's damage. Cross clenched his jaw. Nearly half their ships gone, the rest battered. He shut off the comm and turned to the survivors around him. They stood in torn uniforms, blood and sweat mixing. They deserved more than he could give, but he owed them everything. Cross cleared his throat, the rumble loud in the silent ship. "We honor those lost today. Their courage binds us, steels our spirit. We finish this war for them, for the peace they can't see." His words weighed heavy, a solemn promise shared by all. On Earth, news of the destroyed weapons spread. Cross saw images of crowds holding pictures of the fallen. Children waved homemade flags. The elderly stood with hands over hearts. They understood the cost, yet still lined up, heads high, ready to join the fight. The Zanar had meant to silence humanity with the weapon. Instead, its ruins became a rallying cry. Their relentless pursuit lit a flame that wouldn't go out. The war unified humanity in a way peace couldn't. Together they stood, one goal binding them: to end this war for good. Admiral Cross stared at the screen. It showed Zanar messages in alien writing. His command center chilled. The messages meant the Xanar would attack allies' homeworlds with fire. Each symbol was a target. Each sentence promised ruin. Responsibility weighed on Cross. The bridge hummed with machines and busy officers. Time was short. Choices mattered. Human and ally planets both needed defense. Eyes turned to Cross for orders. He had to act fast. "Defend our worlds," some said, tense and glancing around. "Help our allies," others urged, believing unity was strength. Cross stepped up. Silence followed. "Our coalition is only strong if we stand together," he said with conviction. "We'll protect our allies' planets. Our alliance is mutual protection. We fight back." Strategists with star maps gathered, faces serious in the blue glow. Cross pointed out targets that meant survival now. Each counterstrike needed the right tactics for their diverse coalition. Raids hit fringe worlds. Diversions disrupted supply routes. A dance of ships and weapons matched to unity. Calculated blows slowed the coming war. "Fast hits, hard hits vanish before payback," Cross ordered. "Buy time for allies to bulk defenses." Commanders nodded, resolve hardening. Channels crackled with ally leaders. All were making ready. The Rulth had stone fortresses. Skrill ships would storm through. "Launch the first raid," Cross ordered from the bridge, hand pointing at the target. Fast coalition ships darted out, striking Xanar bases with fierce blows. Blooms of fire flashed in space, then faded fast. Murmurs of victory came with each success. The coalition ties strengthened. A Rulth pounded a fist. A Skrill pilot trilled pride. "We'll hold the line," each said in their tongue with shared spirit. The assaults continued, hammering the Xanar advance without let-up. Captains returned scarred but unbroken, reporting impact. The alliance, once fragile, now forged strong in war's fire. Wary species stood shoulder to shoulder. They shared technology, tactics, determination to survive. Many yet one, humanity and allies had become a unified army, ready to face the darkness. Respect filled doubtful eyes. Hearts once afraid, now burned with courage. Cross surveyed it all, his crew, potential futures in holograms. Together, they were ready for what came next. The command room was quiet except for the click of boots and keyboards. Admiral Cross leaned over the map, focused, his eyes sharp on the red dot, the enemy ship. Dr. Keslin straightened from the console. "Their cloaking tech is beyond ours." Heads turned, eyes widened, interest and doubt. "They won't give it up without a fight," Keslin said. His tone was grave. Cross nodded, his face set with the weight of it. "We'll take it from their hands." The plan took shape in the cold room. Each knew their role. Skills honed sharp as blades. Expert hacker, Skrill stealth master, Rulth close combat pro. Their nods were firm, ready. "We strike fast and hard, vanish before they know." Cross didn't need to raise his voice. It reached all. Move together. Hesitation means failure. More nods. Not their first mission. Danger pressed down. Determination filled the hangar. A small ship prepped for silence. Space waiting outside the shields. Cross met his team's eyes. Resolve reflected back. The retribution crept closer to the coordinates. Space remained vast, indifferent. Each breath seemed loud. At the helm, Cross watched the sensors. His team hunched over stations, eyes glued to screens, fingers ready. A blip, the cloaked prototype. It loomed like a predator. Cross gave the signal. "Jam them! Now!" The hacker's fingers flew. Burst of static through communications. The stealth op worked alongside. Sensors blinked, blind. They closed in, each breath stolen from the enemy. Cross nodded to the Rulth at the airlock, weapon ready to pierce the hull. The ship quaked as the doors opened. They slipped inside, latched underbelly. Hidden, tight corridors, sterile metal scent, silent steps. Racing hearts, closer to the goal. The device hummed, wires pulsing. Keslin whispered guiding instructions. They dismantled it piece by piece. Time stretched and compressed. Each second an eternity. Each minute, victory's glimpse. Device in hand, they drifted back. Unseen, untouched. Ghosts through a nightmare. The airlock sealed with a hiss of triumph. They slipped away into the nebula's embrace. Cross smiled. Mission done. A pivotal moment. The tech was theirs. The nebula loomed large. Inside, the gases swirled in flows. Cross and his team waited silently in the junction. The Xanars often patrolled here. Their mission? To capture the cloaking device no matter what. The soldiers, human and alien alike, readied themselves in the cramped stealth ship. Their eyes stayed fixed on the display. It tracked the path of the prototype ship. Right on time, the prototype emerged from the nebula's veil. It cruised by, sleek and unaware. A decoy ship broke away from Cross's group. Its engines flared bright. It darted across the prototype's path. It was a risk, but calculated. The Xanars took the bait. Their ship broke off, chasing the diversion. In that moment, laser fire erupted in the darkness of space. Cross's team moved in. Their boots thudded heavy on the hull as they boarded. The breach charge set. The countdown started. Then the controlled explosion tore open the Xanar ship's skin. Cross entered first, blaster ready. The corridor greeted them with hot lead. His team pushed ahead, firing back in disciplined shots. Their weapons lit up the halls with each burst. Room by room they advanced. Danger lurked at every corner, but they stayed resolute. The team knew their mission mattered. It was about more than tech. It was about hope and survival. They reached the core. There sat the device, its surfaces humming. Engineers scrambled, fingers flying over the controls. Time ticked away as they worked. Eyes glanced over shoulders, watching the escape window shrink. Then the piercing klaxon of the self-destruct alarm sounded. Cross's voice boomed over the noise. "Grab it! We have minutes!" The team ripped the cloaking device free in a shower of sparks. The ship groaned around them as it died. Cross heaved the tech onto his shoulder. Its weight was nothing compared to the burden in his chest. The escape pods awaited, metal salvation. The team piled in, cradling the device. Cross punched the launch. With a hiss and a jolt, the pods shot into space. Behind them, the prototype blew apart in a silent scream. Debris flew, clipping the pods, a reminder of lives lost. Names went unspoken, but their absence weighed heavy. The rescue ship pulled them in. The mood on board was bittersweet victory. Cross set the damaged device down. They had it, the key they needed, battered but theirs. "We have it," he said simply. The engineers examined the tech, faces grim. "It's damaged, but fixable," one said. The others nodded in agreement. Cross allowed himself a moment of rest. They would mourn, repair, and continue to fight. The war raged on, but today they took back hope. Cross entered the small lab. The hum of machines filled the air. Engineers crowded around the broken Xanar device that hid their ships. It lay open on the table, guts spilling out. "Any progress?" Cross's voice cut through the tension. A grease-stained engineer glanced up, weary. "It's tough. The tech's advanced, unlike anything we've seen, but we're close." Alien scientists nodded, fingers flying, symbols flashing as they tested circuits again and again. Days passed. The lab smelled of coffee and rations as breakthroughs came and went. Frustration grew as test after test failed. Then, amid the buzz and clank, something clicked. The device hummed to life, hiding a crate. Exhausted cheers went up. Cross's eyes lit up, reflecting the glow. "Outfit the ships," he ordered. Engineers worked fast, moving the core to waiting ships. Panels sealed, screens calibrated. Now invisible, the fleet slipped past enemy lines like ghosts. They traced supply lines, charted fleet moves, found weaknesses. On the Retribution's bridge, Cross watched his cloaked ships go deep into enemy space. "Time to hit them where it hurts," he said, pointing at cruisers on the map. Brief orders flew from his lips. The cloaked ships attacked fast, then withdrew before the Xanar could lock on. Screens lit up with Xanar confusion. Scrambled commands addressed unseen threats. Once coordinated, maneuvers fell apart as the cloak let Cross's ships strike and vanish. On the Retribution, the crew watched in awe. Each hit fed their fire, knowing the Xanar stumbled with every strike. "We don't just survive, we make them fear the shadows," Cross said, smiling rare as he watched the stars, no longer just stars, but a battlefield where the hunted now hunted. The Retribution crept closer to the Xanar home planet, the silent enemy. The hum of the engine filled the quiet bridge. The crew stared ahead, faces tight. They knew their mission. Each one had a job that mattered, like gears in an engine. No one wasted breath on words. Admiral Cross stood still, eyes fixed on the star map. A drop of sweat slid down his forehead despite the cool air. His finger traced their path to the planet. The crew waited for his signal, ready to follow his slightest order. Around him, the diplomats whispered and shuffled papers. They practiced arguments, preparing to sway the course of war. In the armory, soldiers checked weapons and gear. Every weapon was ready, each bullet in place, safeties off when the time came. They moved with purpose, instinct guiding their hands. Each one volunteered for this based on skill and courage. They were ready for anything, to fight, protect, capture, persuade. Commander Sanchez approached the admiral, voice barely a whisper. "We're close to the jump point." Cross nodded, gaze locked on the map. He spoke with weight that filled the room. "Once we jump, there's no going back. Are the cloak generators at full power?" "Yes, Admiral," Sanchez said with a nod. "The engineers did their job. We're invisible to all but the gods." "Then let's hope the gods are on our side today," Cross muttered. He turned to the crew. "This is it. Make your peace and stay sharp. We jump on my mark." The tension gripped them like a living thing, a shared heartbeat. With a simple nod from Cross, the ship lurched into the Zanar system. The Retribution slipped through like a ghost. As they neared the planet, sensors lit up, a web of grids and patrols outlined before them. Cross studied the data, calculating. The diplomats rehearsed speeches under their breath. "Steady," Cross told the helmsman, who nodded. "No wasted words." The ship glided between obstacles with precision. A drop of sweat beaded on Sanchez's brow, the sign of adrenaline in them all. But discipline ruled each crew member. They were masters of their roles. They drew closer to the planet, that blue and green orb housing their enemies, their hope, their potential doom. Cross knew the decisions made here would echo through history. The tension bound them together, the silence, the mission, the stakes. In the coming hours, they could gain or lose everything. Admiral Cross leaned over the controls, scanning readouts as the cloaking shield around the Retribution flickered in the craggy moon's shadow. "Status on the fighters?" he demanded, voice steady. "Ready, sir," Lieutenant Grovnik replied, hands poised over the blinking console. Cross nodded once. "Go on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." In space, the cloaked fighters broke away, silent ghosts against the black. The pilots knew their targets, the defense nodes orbiting the Zanar planet like deadly pearls. Their precise wrath awaited. Anticipation hummed through the Retribution's hull. The commandos checked gear and weapons with clicks. The diplomats rehearsed low, firm lines. Cross watched the screen as the first node went dark. Sabotaged from within. Another node blinked out, then a third. Each silent victory brought them closer to Zanar Power's heart. "Windows opening," Sanchez muttered, eyeing the clock. "Minutes only." Cross turned to the crew. "This is it. Take us in. Nice and easy." The ship slid from the moon's embrace, creeping toward the weakening shield. Sensors flickered and faltered. The invisible Retribution slipped through. Rifles in hand, the commandos lined up at the airlock with the diplomats, ultimatums folded close to their hearts. "Groundside, we move fast," Cross briefed them. "Commandos, secure the area. Diplomats, get us a leadership meeting. No mistakes." Sharp nods acknowledged the stakes. They were Earth's best hope, ready. The Retribution touched down on the city outskirts, buildings like silent sentinels. Swift and efficient, the commandos secured the area. The diplomats followed, stark contrasts to the soldiers, but just as crucial. Sanchez's hand was on the communicator. "Teams in position, Admiral." "Good," Cross replied. "Now we wait and see if they'll talk." In the shadows, humanity waited for diplomacy's dawn, or continued war's darkness. The Retribution landed on the alien planet. The grey stone buildings were different than Earth's colors and shapes. Streets were empty and tidy, showing the culture's love of order. Cross led his cloaked team out. They moved quietly down the empty walkways. Eyes searched windows and corners for threats. The silence made the tension thicker. Each one knew the danger ahead. They came to the government district and the Admiral's compound. High walls with sensors and guards surrounded it. Xanar soldiers walked the grounds, confident and ready. Cross signaled his team and they spread out to watch the patrols. His heartbeat steady, focus sharpened by the adrenaline. What happened here could decide humanity's future. The towering walls around the compound were blank, no easy way up, but that didn't stop them. The engineer put a device on the wall, a section disappeared, a doorway opened up. They slipped through one by one. The device resealed it behind them. The inner courtyard was a grid of paths and sharp angles. They crept along the walls, their soft footsteps the only sound. They moved towards the huge door to the fortress depths. Cross's team got in position, each one ready, each step rehearsed. They waited for Cross's signal. He nodded, and the breach team rushed the door. It opened with a gasp of air. They went in, non-lethal weapons ready. Corridors stretched before them, leading deeper inside. Cross signaled a halt. They were in enemy ground now. Every shadow might be a threat. They had to find the Admiral quietly. Easier said than done. The twisting corridors matched the maps Dr. Keslin gave them. Cross led the way, remembering the route. They met no one. Luck or their silence kept them hidden. They came to the door for the command hub. The Admiral would be inside, running the war. Cross felt determined as he got his team ready. Breach, capture. Their mission was clear. The engineer hacked the door panel. It slid open easily. They poured inside, stunning beams crisscrossing the dim room. The Admiral stood there, framed by the star map. Surprise flashed in his eyes as he saw the intruders. His elite soldiers reacted fast, but couldn't match Cross's non-lethal team. It was swift and one-sided. Cross faced the Admiral, gazes locked, a charged moment between them, with lives hanging in the balance. "Admiral, you're our prisoner," Cross said with command. "Stand down. No one else needs to get hurt." The Admiral's pride battled capture, but he nodded. He would go quietly. They restrained him securely, leaving no chance to fight back. Cross turned to his team. A look said it all. Job done. Time to extract themselves and the VIP prisoner. They left the compound as stealthily as they'd entered, the city oblivious to the massive shift inside its walls. The Retribution's engines hummed as they boarded and lifted off, cloak intact. The compound's sensors never saw them. Cross got the Admiral aboard with the team whole. As the ship left the planet behind, Cross felt proud. They'd done the impossible, changing the war's course in one bold move. In the ship's quiet, heading to rejoin the fleet, the victory sank in. Skill and spirit, not blood, had let them seize the enemy's leader. The planet faded away, witness to humanity's resolve. The compound's massive gate was ahead, locked tight, but the plasma cutter sliced through it like a knife. The metal door crashed down with a heavy thud, echoing off the bare walls. "Move!" Cross yelled, storming ahead. Boots pounded the slick floor. His team slid into place, drilled to perfection. The hall split up ahead, a maze to confuse, but Cross had studied the maps until they filled his mind. "Delta left. Echo with me," he ordered. They split on cue, paths set. Hidden guns fired from the walls, elite guards taking aim. Cross dove, rolled, shot back. Beams sizzled by, scorching the walls. His team fired back, calm and precise. A guard fell, stunned but alive. They pushed on, room by room, Cross leading the way. In the government chambers, diplomats made their case. They showed the data, evidence of the Admiral's crimes, ruined colonies, lives destroyed. "You've seen the damage," one said, voice steady but firm. Murmurs filled the room. The officials took it in, shame and disbelief on their faces. "He's gone too far," one whispered, seeking allies of reason. But there was no unity here. Accusations flew, anger reigned. "Lies!" a councillor shouted, fist pounding the fancy table. Back at the compound, the guards fought desperately, but each room brought Cross closer to victory. His team moved as one, ready to die for the cause. They breached the door. The control room exposed, screens, text, the Admiral directing his fleet, oblivious to the chaos coming for him. "Admiral, stand down!" Cross's voice boomed through the room. The Admiral turned, eyes narrowed. But he read Cross's determination, knew he was trapped. The Admiral raised his hands, surrendering his men. Stepped forward, recognizing defeat. The diplomat's words had taken hold, the proof too strong. Cross nodded, and his team moved in to secure their prize. They locked restraints on the Admiral's wrists. Cross felt the tension release from his body. They had won with cunning and bravery. His team retraced their steps, the compound now silent, but for their footfalls. Outside, the cloaked retribution awaited, ready to vanish into the void with the Admiral captive. The engines rumbled, lifting them away as dawn broke on the planet below. On the dim command deck, Cross stood firm. They had done the impossible. The ripples of their actions would be felt across the galaxy. Admiral Cross stood still. His attack team surrounded him, guns ready, but not firing. The Xanar Admiral across the command room scowled at Cross. His uniform was clean. The room felt tense. Nobody spoke threats out loud. "You've got no chance, human. You being here is an insult," the Xanar Admiral said. His voice echoed off the cold metal walls. Cross's face was stone. He said, "We've seen your orders. Colonies burned to ash, families ripped apart. End this now. Give up and stop the suffering." The Admiral laughed meanly. "You talk of suffering. Your kind knows nothing of sacrifice. You've only dragged out this war's pain." The two leaders locked eyes on opposite sides. The ship's hum filled the quiet room. The room's radio crackled alive. A crisp voice broke the staring contest. "Attention all. The Council voted. The Admirals removed from power, effective now. We want peace with the Coalition." Shock, betrayal, defeat crossed the Admiral's face. His shoulders slumped. His clenched fists fell to his sides. "Your own side turns against you," Cross said. His words weighed heavy in the room. The Admiral glanced at his unsure guards, weapons lowered as they heard the news. With a nod from Cross, his team moved in. They took the guards' weapons and secured the room. Cross stepped toward the Admiral, controlled. "It's over. Come with us. You won't be harmed." The beaten Admiral nodded silently. Nothing left to fight for. The commandos cuffed the Admiral's wrist securely, but not too tight. They were soldiers, not butchers. Cross's team escorted the ex-Admiral out, through the compound's quiet halls, out into the alien night. The retribution loomed overhead, known to all now. The ship's ramp hissed open. They boarded, the prisoner with them. The engines rumbled alive as the retribution lifted off, left the planet and its politics behind. As the ship moved to rejoin the Coalition fleet, the silent stars outside saw the war's tide turn. Mission done. The Admiral captured. Peace possible now. Cross stood on the bridge, watching space clear as they exited the planet's sky. This battle won, but the war was theirs to finish. The engines throbbed as Admiral Cross stood silently on the bridge, watching the stars streak past. His grip tightened on the chair, the only sign of his tension. Behind them, the Xanar homeworld shrank away. A coup through diplomacy, not violence. The crew exchanged guarded looks, movements stiff, voices crisp with status reports. The captured Admiral sat quietly under guard below, his fate now tangled in politics. The comm beeped. An officer answered. "It's the Xanar government," he told Cross, face blank. "On screen," Cross ordered, rising as all eyes turned to him. The Xanar symbol swirled into an official's worried face. "Admiral Cross," he began, "we offer an armistice. We must rebuild, prevent chaos." Cross nodded. "We'll consider terms, send envoys for peace talks." He cut the transmission. The bridge filled with soft machine buzzes and muted officer whispers. Peace, however fragile, was a break in the storm clouds shadowing the galaxy. Commander Sanchez approached, boots soft on the metal floor, face strained from battle. "May I speak freely, sir?" she asked. "Go ahead," Cross replied evenly. "We fought to survive, now negotiate for peace. Your instincts haven't failed us yet," she said confidently. Cross nodded slightly. "Thank you, Commander, but the weapons are silent now. Our words must speak volumes." Sanchez nodded barely, eyes back on the status screens reporting ship readiness. The retribution sailed on, carrying hope for a truce. It made its way toward Coalition space, debris and glow of witnessed struggle lining its path. Below decks, envoys and diplomats reviewed data pads, rehearsing their roles in the talks. Some practiced greetings and concessions. Others studied Xanar codes and customs. They knew the gravity of their mission. Words were their weapons now, aimed at forging lasting peace. As the Retribution joined the coalition fleet, cautious relief spread through the ranks. Crews stood together, human and alien, united by the ceasefire, a mosaic from across the galaxy, each with stories of loss and defiance. At the helm, Cross remained vigilant, a sentinel leading a ship that had defied odds and turned the war's tide. Though acclaimed, he knew the true test of his leadership lay ahead. With the galaxy watching, securing peace loomed large. Cross watched his crew, knowing the coming days would demand as much as any battle. They pioneered diplomacy, tasked with bridging war and peace. The leaders assembled, faces etched with exhaustion. They looked to Cross for guidance. He stepped forward, clearing the low hum with his presence. "We stand at a crossroads," he began, voice resonating. "Our choices shape the future. We carry war's lessons, but peace must guide us now. We move forward with eyes open and shields down, crafting a galaxy where children know the stars without fear." Heads nodded, the air charged with purpose. The ship sailed on, its crew united in one goal: secure, hard-won peace. With the galaxy watching, humanity readied itself to turn swords to plowshares, find strength not in weapons but in bonds with former enemies. The journey continued in silence, but for the quiet hum of engines and whispers of history in the making. The starship engines stopped. Their metal hulls cooled as they floated back to their worlds. The uneasy quiet filled the space, left empty by the battles. Admiral Cross stood in the meeting room on the space station above the dead planet. The room buzzed from the electronic translators. Officers and diplomats found their seats. Commander Sanchez and Dr. Keslin sat with him. Data pads were in their hands. Their faces looked serious. The Xanar group entered last. Their scales and uniforms stood out. Their steps seemed calm, but their eyes showed fear and regret. The room felt heavy as they sat across from the humans. The talks moved like a chess match. Cross spoke clearly. He demanded the Xanar fix what their fire destroyed. "Our people deserve to recover," he said, "and to be sure this war stays in the past." The Xanar diplomats looked at each other. Their leader nodded slightly. "We want to rebuild too," he said. "Not just our cities, but trust. We'll consider paying to fix things." Dr. Keslin spoke evenly. "Promise to never attack again. That will bring real peace." Murmurs rumbled through the station like quiet thunder. Eyes darted around. Everyone watched and waited. The screens showed empty space, a reminder of the devastation they wanted to leave behind. The talks went on, ideas went back and forth. Each word got examined to avoid misunderstandings. Stale air cycled as hours passed. Both sides talked about their painful histories, looking for how to fix what got broken. As the station's artificial day ended, an agreement took shape. The table held crumpled data sheets and drained batteries, showing the mental marathon. Exhaustion lined the faces of Cross and the others, but a spark of hope lit their tired eyes. The final terms got written in silence. Each group left for home with a copy. The room emptied, leaving just the hum of machines and a quiet that meant more than peace. It held the fragile seed of a future without the shadows of war. Cross stood in the strategy room. His face got lit up by the blue light of the floating hologram in front of him. The hologram showed where the Xanar factions were attacking. Each attack a disregard for the peace treaty. Each one a threat to the war ending. "Sir, reports are flooding in," Sanchez said. She kept looking at the screen. "This isn't random. They're coordinating this." Cross nodded. His jaw muscles flexed. "Connect me with the coalition leaders. We have to act now." The conference room filled up with worried leaders. Cross commanded their attention by just standing there. "Renegades are hitting our planets. If we don't stop them, everything we built will collapse. I have a plan to take them out fast and clean." The leaders murmured agreement. They trusted Cross and supported him. The task force came together quickly. A fleet of ships with one job: take down the rogue factions. Cross stood on the Retribution's bridge. The ship's course was set. "We hit hard and fast. We capture their leaders. No casualties, no collateral damage. We end this before it's war again." The ships emerged in the rogue systems with surgical precision. Cross's forces broke into the outposts. stun lights flashing as they moved in disciplined silence. The dissidents barely raised their weapons before getting disarmed and knocked down. Room by room, the task force cleared the stations. Control panels flickered as the security feeds died. Data banks got wiped of any logs. The leaders, battle-hardened warriors, got cornered and cuffed without any deaths. Cross's voice sounded over the comms. Leaders captured, bases locked down, prep for extraction. The captured Xanar got lined up, eyes burning with fury and fear, as they got led onto the retribution. Cross watched them, face unreadable. "Your fight is over," he said with finality. Back at the talks, word of the successful takedown spread fast. Cross's decisive action swung momentum to the peace advocates, their voices rising over the grumbling war hawks. "You have our gratitude, Admiral," a Xanar diplomat said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "You've shown us a better path." The treaty held firm. The coalition made stronger by enduring the test. Cross sat back as the talks continued, blending his quiet confidence with the hum of hopeful conversation filling the room. The war wasn't over, but today they'd won an important victory. The Retribution's bridge was quiet. Only the engines hummed and consoles beeped. Cross stood staring at the stars streaking by. His crew focused on their work, their faces tense from the war. Sanchez leaned over her console. "We're picking up strange readings, sir. Something we've never seen before." Cross faced his advisors. Humans and aliens watched him, uneasy. A Takarian studied datapads, his computational mind analyzing. "We should be careful," he said. "We don't know their technology or motives." Cross nodded. "Keep the shields up. No traps today." Beside him, Keslin examined the sensor spikes, a mix of awe and fear on his face. "This civilization is beyond us," he said softly. Cross stepped closer to the readouts. The energy spikes were sharp and clear. "How long until visual range?" he asked. "Minutes, sir," navigation replied. The Retribution led the fleet, ships from coalition races in formation behind it. They bristled with guns, ready for anything. The unknown loomed into view as they left FTL speed. A massive structure floated against the stars, smooth surfaces glinting. Cross's hand hovered over his console, ready to act. The crew waited, torn between curiosity and instinctive fear. "Open hailing frequencies," Cross ordered. "Let's see if they'll talk." Sanchez relayed the message. The comm officers transmitted greetings in all known languages. They waited, hearing only the ship's systems. Then a deep, layered voice responded in an unknown language. The translator interpreted it quickly. "Welcome, travelers. What brings you to our space?" it asked. Cross stepped forward firmly. "We come in peace to learn about others." An alien image appeared on screen, its features new and distinct. It had no mouth. Its telepathic message filled their minds. "We watch the cosmic dance, chronicling all," it projected. "We've seen your war against the Xanar. Few species so young resist them." Cross met his advisor's eyes, pride and caution in his gaze. "We defend ourselves and value allies. We could teach each other much." The alien nodded, its smooth geometric head shifting. "Let us meet in person then, Admiral. Observation is useful, but interaction brings true understanding." Keslin spoke urgently. "We should meet them, Admiral. An alliance could give us knowledge, even technology." Cross considered, weighing opportunity and risk. The war had taught caution. "Send a delegation," he decided. "Full honors here on the Retribution, but discreet security." Sanchez nodded. "I'll make the arrangements." As the crew leapt into action, Cross watched the alien image. A new chapter was starting. It could bring progress or new dangers. But the coalition stood united, ready to face the void's unknowns. The dead ship floated in the void. The hull was scarred from years traveling the stars. The coalition fleet approached the giant relic. Ships from many worlds hummed at low power. Admiral Cross led the boarding team. His suit lights cut the dark inside the ancient corridors. The architecture was strange, curved and angular together. It suggested an artistic yet precise people. Their boots clanged on the metal floors. The sound echoed in the lifeless air. Forgotten screens and chairs told of a lost crew. The designs looked advanced, the tech dormant, but ahead of the coalition's. Visors down, comms check, Cross said evenly. His eyes scanned the shadows. His team checked in, their voices reminding them of their shared goal. They moved forward, flashlights pushing back the dark. The ghost ship revealed a people who valued knowledge. Rooms held old equipment, nav systems, full databanks. But there was disorder amidst the promise. Gutted panels, stripped wiring, signs of conflict, a struggle to survive. Burnt metal and decay tainted the air. Not the usual sterile ship smell. Remnants of battle lay about. Dark stains on walls, shattered gear on the floor, cracked consoles. "Look here," Dr. Keslin said, kneeling by a shattered beacon. Scorch marks marred the cold metal. "They were attacked," Cross said with certainty. "This was on purpose." They pressed on, finding more signs of a desperate defense. Barricades, makeshift weapons, a flickering star chart with skewed projections. "Cross to retribution," he said into the comms. His voice echoed slightly. "Full investigation needed. Evidence of conflict, advanced tech, possible unknown hostile force." "Affirmative, Admiral," came the reply through the static. They reached the bridge, a wide room with cracked stellar views. Overturned seats, gutted central console. A grave for the lost crew. Cross surveyed the grim scene. This proud ship now a tomb, its people victims of an unseen enemy. The stale air still thick with those last moments, the crew caught unaware. "We'll find who did this," Cross murmured, a promise to himself and the Coalition's ideals. The team gathered samples, images, failing system data, pieces to solve this puzzle. They worked in silence with the weight of their discovery. Hours passed before they returned to the Retribution. Its familiar warmth welcomed them home from the alien chill of the derelict. As the airlock sealed, Cross removed his helmet and met his crew's eyes. The significance of their find hung unspoken. A new chapter of uncertainty for the war-scarred galaxy. "Briefing room in 20, Cross said steadily. "We've got work to do." He left the airlock, steps echoing the metal floors, each one towards understanding, towards facing whatever lurked in the dark unknown. Admiral Cross looked at the display. The last message from the ghost ship showed coordinates across the black space. A string of numbers pulled the fleet like a beacon. "Set course," he said. The navigator typed the numbers into the computer. The trip was quiet. The crew felt tense, ready for action. They knew the warning changed their mission. When the stars showed Haven, they saw only destruction. Scans showed shattered cities, burned forests, and poisoned oceans. From space, the damage looked deep and wide, from a cruel attack. "Send landing teams," Cross ordered. The bay doors opened. Shuttles flew down through the burnt orange sky. Cross joined a team, needing to see Haven himself. They landed in a once great city, now just bones. They walked empty streets. Their boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. Elegant buildings lay crumpled. Cross touched a warm wall torn open. Cracked screens lined the roads, showing last messages begging for help. In the city center they found the beacon. It stood strong amid the death, untouched steel and light. Keslin used the interface. A map appeared, showing the march of marauders across worlds. The beacon foretold an unknown merciless force, a shadow of doom with sights on new targets. The voice of the dead gave a chilling warning: unchecked conquest, and darkness would follow. Cross saw his crew take in the warning, their eyes lit with determination. This was more than a mission now. It was a call to battle that screamed across space. Back on the Retribution, Haven's fate weighed heavy. Cross's mind raced. The new threat was coming for them. They would confront it head-on. They carried Haven's warning. Their struggles against Xanar were just the beginning of a greater war. The Retribution joined the fleet over Haven, engines humming a dirge. Cross looked into the void, knowing their fight to survive was just starting. The dead had warned them. Only unity and resolve would see them through the storms ahead. The summit room buzzed with voices. Dozens of aliens filled the sleek metal room, screens glowing behind them. They went silent when Cross put up images of Haven's destruction. He stood at the center, leaders from across the galaxy staring back. "No pleasantries, you've seen Haven," a warning. The same fate waits for us all if we don't act, Cross said firmly. A feathered sylphid stood up. What's your plan, Admiral? Cross tapped the console, bringing up stations and ships. A united front. Action, not just talk. We build, plan, arm ourselves with more than guns. The display changed to outpost blueprints and planets connected by lines. Cross met their eyes with resolve. The Galactic Defense Initiative. Share knowledge. Shield our homes. Innovate because our lives depend on it. The room erupted with talk. Old rivalries faded, facing the shared threat. A Thrawn clicked his mandibles. We're with you, Admiral. The Thrawn will contribute sciences, ships. We don't back down from a challenge. Nods and agreement rippled around. Cross smiled briefly, eyes steeled against the horizon. You lead this, Cross, a hulking Gravorian rumbled. Command the GDI, take us to safety. They pledged resources, knowledge, people to the GDI, talked of reactors, shields, and a fleet like no other. Construction began in secret. Ships silhouetted the stars. Scientists and engineers worked side by side. Cross watched the first outpost take shape from his ship. Status? On schedule. Weapons to follow, Sanchez replied, scanning data. Ellarian tech is proving useful already. Good. Diplomatic front. Strong. Even the Varul Senate is interested. Cross nodded, jaw clenched in satisfaction. The GDI was now real, growing stronger. The galaxy watched and worked together. Admiral Cross stood on the Retribution's bridge and focused on the stars ahead. Sensors beeped as they scanned explored space. Cross watched patrol blips move across the map, spreading across unknown space like a web. Scanners got something, sir, Lieutenant Harrow reported. She focused the image. Small, fast ship, not ours. Visual, Cross ordered. The screen showed a sleek, dangerous-looking alien ship with erratic movement against the stars. Cross noted every threatening detail. The aggressive design, the unpredictable path, the faint energy of unknown tech. We've got company, Commander Sanchez said beside him, calm but alert. Launch interceptors and drones. I want that ship, Cross commanded. The Retribution sprang to life as pilots and drones activated for pursuit. Space soon filled with the Coalition's response, ready for the aliens' reaction. The alien ship dodged the first drones with advanced maneuvering. But Cross stayed patient, planning tactics. The second wave disabled its thrusters. It drifted, damaged, but intact. Boarding party, go, Cross ordered. Armored troops jetted over and attached grapples. Cross monitored their progress. The hatch blew open, blaster fire echoed over comms. Then silence. Minutes later, Captain Reeves reported in, Ship secure, Admiral. Prisoners captured. Bringing them back. Good work, Captain, Cross answered. The hangar prepared as the alien ship was towed inside under bright lights. Soldiers escorted shackled aliens off it, armored and battle-ready in appearance. In the brig, the Krivak prisoners stayed defiant. Through the barrier, Cross met their scarred leader's gaze. We are Krivak, the translator said. Conquest is life. You cannot hold us. I disagree, Cross replied. Your ship's here. Your crew's imprisoned. Your mission failed. The Krivak snarled. This means nothing. We are endless. We will rise again. Endless or not, you're here and you'll tell us everything. We've beaten threats before. We'll beat another, Cross said firmly. Leaving the brig, Cross started putting pieces together. Their warlike culture and fractured society, he would solve this puzzle. The Coalition had to prepare for the Krivak's next attack. Cross walked back to the bridge with purpose. Full debrief, he told Sanchez. We need their weaknesses, their strategies. If they want a fight, they'll get one. The vigilant Retribution cruised the border, its new captives a reminder, the calm before another storm. But the Galactic Defense Initiative stood ready under Cross to meet whatever came next. Cross walked into the conference chamber. His boots banged on the metal floor. A half-circle of diplomats from different planets filled the space. They all stared at Cross. The room stank of polished steel and reused air. It was a familiar stink now. Cross stood straight at the podium. The diplomats' faces glowed from the data screens around them. We're on the edge, Cross said. His voice cut through the murmurs. The Krivak threat is real. It's coming soon. He hit a button. The holodisplay popped up and showed a swirling galaxy. A red wave crept over it, the diplomats muttered. One of them, a Cillian, squeaked, "Some say you're just trying to scare us, Admiral. Are the Krivak really a danger to us all?" Cross nodded. He knew they doubted him. "This isn't about fear. It's about getting ready. We caught a Krivak scout." He pointed at the hollow image of a sharp, scary ship. "This isn't an empty threat." The room went silent as his words sank in. Cross looked each diplomat in the eyes. He had to appeal to their will to survive, not just the facts. "The GDI isn't just a shield against the Krivak," he went on. "It's a statement. We stand together because we choose to, not because we have to." A Vetarian delegate stood up. Her voice boomed. "What about our freedom? Our ways?" "Your ways, your cultures. That's why the GDI must succeed. Diversity is our strength, not division." Cross saw their resistance fading as their faces softened. He could almost hear them thinking it over. The room's energy changed. The diplomats glanced at each other and nodded. After the talks, Cross walked GDI headquarters' gleaming halls with Kieslin. Their steps echoed a promise. Cross felt the galaxy's hope weighing on him. He asked Kieslin, "Think they'll join us?" Kieslin adjusted his wrist device that translated his thoughts. "They will. Your words resonate, Admiral. And fear of the Krivak, it's a powerful motivator." In the next weeks, ships from many civilizations joined the GDI's ranks. Battleships and supply ships lined up at the docks, engines humming a harmony of unity. Workers from different planets worked together. Welding torches sparkled, metal melted. They worked endlessly, strengthening hulls, tuning shields, loading weapons. In the command center, Cross watched new blips appear on the map. Each signaled a new ally's fleet joining them. The map grew crowded, a tapestry woven from the threads of past solitude. On the Retribution's bridge, Cross stood with Sanchez. "Look at them," he said, staring at the docked ships. "This unity, that's our real weapon." Sanchez nodded. The stars shone in her eyes. "Impressive, sir. The Krivak won't know what hit them." As days passed, the GDI's strength grew in numbers and shared belief. It spread among the stars like wildfire. Cross had sparked a beacon of hope in a galaxy bracing for war. Together, they would face the coming storm. Cross looked at the ship display on the Retribution's bridge. Red marks showed Krivak ships around the edge, testing the GDI setup. The Krivak bit at defense spots like sharks circling for food. Cross studied the ships, focused like in a chess game. "See a pattern?" he asked. His crew responded. Sanchez walked over firmly. "Here," she pointed at the screen. "They hit these spots. Each time they go further in, looking for weak points." Cross nodded, hands behind his back. "Makes sense. Get ready for Operation Ironweb. Time to show the Krivak their mistake." Hours later, empty GDI posts floated silently in space. Dark islands waiting. The real fleet hid, cloaked in shadows. A predator to strike. The Krivak came from folded space as expected. Angular warships approached the empty decoys. They fired, arrogant in the trap. "Now," Cross said quietly. The hidden GDI fleet appeared around the Krivak, surrounding them. Light and noise erupted as cannons fired. Cross's ambush unfolded in destruction, cold in its precision. On the Retribution bridge, Cross issued clipped orders. "Tighten the net, hit their flagship, capture those warships." Surprised, the Krivak scrambled to defend. Their formations shattered. One by one, shields failed against the barrage. Warships destroyed. Cross watched the last Krivak ship seized, hull breached and weapons out. Cheers erupted at the decisive win. But Cross thought ahead. A victory, not the end. The real war out there waited. "We have them," Sanchez said, but her voice held no triumph. She knew too. Cross nodded once, eyes steady. "Prisoners, interrogate. Learn everything. We are relentless, so are they. Just the start." The cloaked GDI fleet returned to spots in vast space, ready for the next fight. Cross stood vigilant and firm, a sentinel against the coming war.